Welcome to the deep dive. We've
Yeah.
got a really fascinating one for you today.
Oh, absolutely. This is a fun one.
Now, I want you to imagine a cultural phenomenon so massive and so globally recognized that it actually earned its own dedicated Wikipedia page.
Which is rare for this kind of thing.
Very rare. We are talking about a trend that completely defined a decade of fashion, a look that was emulated by an estimated 11 million women around the world. But the ultimate kicker to this whole story, it was secretly despised by the very woman who made it famous.
It's honestly one of the great ironies of pop culture history. You have this absolute pinnacle of aspirational beauty, and behind the scenes, it was just a source of constant frustration for her.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we're getting into today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the Wikipedia article on the Rachel haircut.
Yes, the legendary Rachel.
We're going to unpack the surprising, honestly messy origins of this iconic look, dig into the psychology behind why it caused such a global frenzy, and figure out why, after all these years, it's making a massive comeback today. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand this, we need to look at it as far more than just a story about hair. What you're dealing with here is a fascinating case study in pop culture. It's a masterclass in the powerful illusion of effortlessness.
Right.
And it perfectly demonstrates the unparalleled monocultural influence that television wielded in the 1990s.
The origin story alone is wild because you'd assume something this big, this culturally dominant, was a highly calculated marketing ploy by some network executive in a boardroom.
Right, like a focus grouped character design.
Exactly. But it was basically an emergency fix for a bad hair day. Jennifer Aniston had a manager at the time who also represented the actress Patricia Arquette. And right before the pilot episode of Friends, this manager took one look at Aniston's hair and essentially declared it a disaster.
I mean, she bluntly told her she had a terrible length and that her hair was just way too long and frizzy for television.
Which is wild to think about now.
It's a really harsh assessment, but in the polished world of network television, that manager's critique was the primary catalyst for the entire phenomenon.
And it sets off this chain reaction. Aniston's co-star, Courtney Cox, steps in and recommends her personal hairstylist, a guy named Chris McMillan.
Yeah.
The manager insists Aniston go see him urgently. So McMillan takes one look at this long, frizzy hair and decides he has to do something drastic. Chop the length, add some highlights. But for those of us who aren't salon experts, what did he actually do to her hair structurally?
Structurally, it's a remarkably complex cut. The Rachel is essentially a voluminous, shoulder-length hybrid between a bob and a shag cut.
And a shag is basically that heavily layered, almost choppy rock and roll look, right?
Precisely. He took that choppy texture and combined it with the sleekness of a traditional bob. It features all these distinct layers designed to frame the face and then intentionally flick outwards to create constant movement.
Okay, I see.
The comedian Dwayne Perkins actually analyzed it beautifully in the sources. He pointed out its defining characteristics, the chopped layers, the very specific highlights, and what he affectionately called a weird bang opening.
I love that description. Weird bang opening is the absolute perfect way to describe how the front of that haircut sits.
It really is.
And you can't talk about the cut without the color, which was handled by Michael Canale. He'd been coloring her hair prior to this, but for the Rachel, he lightened her naturally medium brown hair into this rich, caramelized brown base. Then he went in and added blonde tips and what he called paper-thin highlights from the roots all the way to the ends.
And the goal there was to create the impression that her hair had naturally faded in the California sun over a long period of time. Canale was basically painting the canvas to highlight the intricate layers of McMillan's cut.
But the source material drops a major truth bomb here about McMillan, the guy actually wielding the scissors. He was struggling with a severe drug addiction at the time.
He was, yeah.
He later openly admitted that he was under the influence when he gave Jennifer Aniston that very first Rachel cut.
Which adds this incredibly raw, almost chaotic human element to a look that eventually became the gold standard for polished perfection. The contrast between the reality of the creator and the aspirational nature of the creation is striking.
Yeah, totally.
And his actual inspirations for the cut were just as unexpected. He wasn't trying to invent a generation-defining aesthetic. He was looking at male surfers in his hometown of Manhattan Beach, California.
It's so funny to think the ultimate 90s girl next door look came from Manhattan Beach surfer dudes.
Surfers, a specific bob worn by model Barry Smither, and the blowout styles of model Amber Valletta. But the most practical, driving reason for the cut was completely mundane. Macmillan was literally just trying to find a way to grow out Jennifer Aniston's bangs.
Wait, you're telling me the most famous haircut of the decade was essentially a transition style?
It was a functional solution to a universal hair problem. If you've ever tried to grow out bangs, you know how awkward that phase is?
Oh, the worst.
So Macmillan brought up the length of the rest of her hair to make those existing bangs seem longer by comparison. Then he blended and pulled the hair over so it didn't look like traditional bangs at all. That's how we got those iconic layers falling forward around her face.
Wow. So she takes this highly functional solution and debuts it in the first season of Friends, specifically the 1995 episode titled The One with the Evil Orthodontist.
Right.
And the world just collectively loses its mind. Alyssa Ray at E! Online wrote that the hair became so popular, it basically morphed into its own character on the show.
Which is an incredible feat. When a physical trait of an actor rivals the fictional characters for audience attention, you've crossed into a completely different tier of cultural impact. It became the most requested style at salons virtually overnight.
Women were literally flying to Los Angeles just to sit in Chris McMillan's chair. And the detail that completely blew me away, he was only charging $60 at the time.
$60 for a celebrity stylist, even in the mid-90s, is an absolute steal, let alone for the man who invented the hottest trend in the country.
It's unbelievable. But obviously, flying to LA wasn't an option for everyone. Salons across the globe were completely overwhelmed. I want you to picture yourself as a local hairstylist in 1996.
Okay.
Women are marching into your salon, clutching dog-eared copies of Teen Guide as reference material. And if a magazine picture wasn't enough, customers were bringing actual bulky VHS tapes of Friends episodes into the salon.
That is dedication.
They'd ask the stylist to pop the tape into a TV right there while they were sitting in the chair to make absolutely sure they replicated the layers perfectly.
The dedication from the public is astonishing. It speaks to how desperately people wanted to capture a piece of that specific aesthetic.
I found a stat in the sources that really puts that desperation into perspective. A stylist in Alabama reported she was doing about 4 Rachels every single week for women ranging from young teens to 30-somethings.
Wow.
Another stylist noted the cut accounted for a staggering 40% of her entire female clientele business. It completely infiltrated middle America. And naturally, other celebrities tried to jump on the bandwagon.
Though it seems the success rate for replicating it was fairly low.
Extremely low. Mariah Carey tried it in the mid-90s. And looking back, she called it a sad attempt, even though Aniston kindly defended it in the press.
That's nice of her.
But the Debra Messing anecdote is the most revealing. The producers of Will and Grace desperately wanted her to replicate the style for her own sitcom. They went straight to the source and had Chris McMillan himself do the initial cut on Messing.
So she had the original architect of the haircut, but they still couldn't make it work.
Exactly, because they quickly realized that maintaining it without McMillan on set every single day was physically impossible. They'd spent hours trying to straighten Messing's naturally curly hair, and she said it ended up looking like a giant mushroom, which proves the haircut was essentially an optical illusion. It relied heavily on Aniston's specific hair texture and a dedicated Hollywood styling team.
What's fascinating here is the massive disconnect between how the public perceived the haircut and how the person actually wearing it felt. The ultimate irony of the Rachel is that Jennifer Aniston thoroughly hated it.
Hated it with a passion. She went on the record calling it the ugliest haircut I've ever seen. She even said she would rather shave her head entirely than ever be forced to wear it again.
You really have to look at the mechanics of why she felt that way. To the millions of women watching Friends, it looked breezy and natural. In reality, it was incredibly high maintenance.
Yeah.
It demanded regular, precise trims just to keep the choppy layers sharp. It required a blow dryer, a round brush, and according to Macmillan, sometimes 3 different brushes and Velcro rollers just to define all those signature outward flicks.
Aniston actually likened the process of styling it herself to performing surgery. She admitted that she loved it on day one when McMillan styled. I mean, it was the first time her hair ever got compliments.
Right.
But without him there to do his magic, her own attempts at styling, it just turned into what she called a frizzy mop. The upkeep was a daily nightmare for her.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that very illusion of effortlessness explains so much about why the style became a cultural juggernaut. Think about what was happening in fashion right before this. The early 90s were heavily dominated by grunge.
Right, so you're seeing Nirvana, Pearl Jam, lots of flannel, messy, unkempt, basically anti-establishment looks everywhere you look.
Exactly. And hairstylist Luke Hirschison theorized that the Rachel was a direct, visceral rejection of that grunge aesthetic. It was a pendulum swing back towards something polished.
Makes sense.
But it was a very specific kind of polish. Hannah Morrill of Today pointed out that the cut looked like a style you could achieve just by rolling out of bed and raking a brush through your hair. Now, we know that was completely false, but the illusion was incredibly powerful.
It really was.
It stood in stark contrast to the teased, heavily sprayed helmet hairstyles of the 1980s and the messy grunge of the early 90s. It presented this accessible ideal. It was the every woman cut.
It sold the illusion of effortless beauty. And it certainly helped that this illusion was being broadcast into living rooms on a massive scale. Friends was pulling in an average of 25 million viewers per episode.
That is a staggering number.
When you think about the fragmented media landscape we live in today, where a hit show might get a few million viewers, 25 million people staring at those perfect bouncy layers on the exact same night every single week is mind-boggling.
That kind of monocultural exposure is unprecedented, and it solidified the haircut's legacy almost instantly.
So what does this all mean for its place in history? The stats on that legacy are just undeniable. Hairdressers Journal International estimated that around 11 million women emulated the cut.
11 million.
And in 2004, right as Friends was ending, Morphy Richards conducted a poll of 2,000 women. They voted the Rachel as the most influential haircut of all time. It beat out Farrah Fawcett's iconic flip. It beat Princess Diana's crop. It even beat Marilyn Monroe.
It transcended being a simple beauty trend and became a definitive historical marker for the decade.
Entertainment Weekly even declared it the most desired haircut of the entire Clinton era. They did this photo shoot in 1995 that perfectly captured how ubiquitous the hair had become. The photographer, Robert Trachtenberg, designed this surreal concept where Aniston had to stick her head through a wooden hole in a window display.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and she was completely surrounded by a bunch of faceless wig heads all sporting her exact haircut.
Visually striking, but that sounds physically incredibly uncomfortable for her.
It was totally awkward. But Trachtenberg noted she was a real trooper about it. She fully supported poking fun at the sheer madness of the hairstyle, and the aftermath of that madness permanently altered careers. For Aniston, it cemented her as a lifelong hair icon. Even after she grew the style out after just 8 months, which still shocks me that it was actually on the show for such a short window, people obsessed over her hair. She even launched her own hair care line in 2021, explicitly stating she was inspired to create it because of how brutally hard it was to maintain the Rachel.
And it absolutely skyrocketed Chris McMillan's career. It turned him into one of the most in-demand celebrity stylists on the planet. In 2018, he won the Hairstylist of the Year award from InStyle magazine.
Oh, wow.
Fittingly, Jennifer Aniston presented the award to him, heavily referencing that famous cut in her speech.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Just when you'd assume the Rachel was permanently retired to the pop culture history books, right alongside dial-up internet and Tamagotchis, it came roaring back in the 2020s.
It's a textbook example of cyclical fashion, heavily driven by a new generation discovering the aesthetic.
The catalysts for this comeback are a perfect storm. You have Gen Z, who developed this massive fascination with 90s nostalgia. Then you throw in the highly anticipated Friends reunion television special that aired in July 2021.
Right, that brought it all back to the surface.
Suddenly the aesthetic is everywhere again. Major celebrities started adopting it. Selena Gomez wore a version of it on The Kelly Clarkson Show. Chrissy Teigen got it. Bella Hadid was spotted sporting it.
And the digital footprint of this resurgence is enormous.
The beauty retailer Just My Look reported a 179% surge in demand for the haircut. On TikTok, the hashtag Rachel Green racked up over 600 million views by June of 2021 alone.
600 million. That's incredible.
Instagram had over 1 million uses of the hashtag around the same time. Evoke.ie reported they had never seen numbers like that for any other hair trend. But the crucial detail here is that they aren't marching into salons asking for the exact same cut Chris McMillan did in 1995.
No, they're asking for what the beauty media has dubbed the modern Rachel. And the modern version actually solves some of the structural issues Aniston had with the original. It's styled to be slightly longer and a bit softer.
Okay, so a bit more relaxed.
Exactly. Macmillan himself noted that he still gives the cut frequently, but he updates it by decreasing the volume at the crown, making it far less top-heavy. But it still retains that signature face-framing flick that defined the original look.
And the way Gen Z is styling it is so much smarter. Instead of destroying their hair with an intense heat from a heavy daily blowout, TikTok users are achieving the look using modern curling irons and traditional hair rollers.
Yes.
They're getting that bouncy movement but suffering way less heat damage than the original 90s style demanded. So they basically reverse engineered the look to be healthier. They want the 90s aesthetic, but they're using modern hair care logic to get there.
Which is a brilliant adaptation. It shows how trends evolve. They take the visual appeal of the era, but apply modern sensibilities to the execution.
It's just a wild ride from start to finish. You have a manager demanding an urgent fix for frizzy hair.
Yeah.
You have a stylist creating a masterpiece while struggling with addiction. You have a transition style meant to grow out bangs that goes on to define a cultural era, emulated by 11 million women, causing absolute chaos in salons across the globe.
Yeah.
And at the center of it all is a star who despised the haircut because it was an exhausting nightmare to manage.
It's a phenomenal story, and to me it emphasizes that the Rachel was never just about hair. It was the physical manifestation of an entire era's collective desire for bouncy, accessible optimism. It was a cultural mood disguised as an easy haircut.
This raises an important question. The Rachel was fundamentally an illusion, a style that looked incredibly natural and effortless to millions of viewers, but actually required an arsenal of brushes, Velcro rollers, and a professional stylist to prevent it from becoming a frizzy mop. As you go about your week and scroll through your own social media feeds, look at the seemingly effortless trends and lifestyles being sold to you today. What is the modern-day equivalent of the Rachel in your world? That thing that looks so natural on a screen but actually requires an exhausting amount of invisible labor to maintain.
It's a great question to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.